Right, started the recording. Yep, thanks very much. I've just started recording the session. Uh, I'll recap on a few bits at the end. But so a few of you started a portfolio session. Nikita has found a useful resource which you've pasted in the chat. And sorry, Felicity, that was. Also said that the 101 steps to histology was a good resource. Did anyone look at that PowerPoint show that was in one of the other links? There are a couple of links under that assessments tab, weren't there, which I said were quite good for the HandE variation manual. One of them sounds like some of you at least have had a look at. That's 101 steps to histology, or whatever it's called. Really nice and easy to read. Has anyone looked at that that little PowerPoint, troubleshooting in HandE? Well, I'll tell you what, I'll just going to share my screen of that one for a moment. So I'll just click to share screen again. Let's go back, share the screen, turn that on. So if you go back to the learning management system under assessment, there's a link to this troubleshooting in HandE here. So this is like 29 slides, but if you have a quick, I'll just flick through these quickly if I can. You can see problems of white spots, and there's photographs, a couple of photographs there. What to do if hemotoxin's too light? Ooh, that sounds interesting. Just what we're talking about, hemotoxin too dark, and the same goes through with pale staining of eosin, talks a little bit about pH and so forth. So that's quite a handy little resource in addition to that sort of 101 steps one. So I'll just stop sharing the screen again, get back to where we were. So do you remember when we last caught up, we were saying, look, I don't really mind how you write this HandE variation assignment. Has anyone actually decided how they're going to write it up, whether it's going to be written or whether they're going to try and do an annotated protocol or a flow chart or a table? Anyone got any thoughts on how that's going to work? Okay, so Felicity's going to have a crack at annotated flow chart. And again, this you remember when we last met, I was saying this is why I haven't really got a word count on this session, because if you're going to do an annotated flow chart, that's not really going to be so word intensive as a written one, and likewise may take several pages depending on how you try and fit things in, especially if there's pictures. So okay, flow chart, that's good, makes sense. Be more interesting for me to look at things if they're in a different style. So has anyone actually made a start? I know I had, you might remember I had some assignment, it's a bit like this actually, it's worth 30 or 40% to do for my graduate certificate in health professional education. And what I found useful, I've got one study buddy who's doing the same thing. It's a totally online course. So we occasionally have a Zoom catch up or just exchange a few texts, say, have you started? Have you found a good reference? How's it going? That sort of thing. And that's been really good. If I know that someone else has started and I haven't, sometimes I find that a bit of a motivator. So I don't know how much you all know one another anyway, how easy that would be to pair up with someone and just share ideas or just sort of poke one another occasionally to make sure things are ticking along. But that's really what I'm trying to create the opportunity for here, just a chance to say, right, catch up, things are happening, I'm thinking about it, and I want to keep that assignment in the top of my mind. So no one's actually stuck their hand up or posted in the chat to say they've actually started yet. Is that, am I right in thinking that of all the 8 of us logged on at the moment, no one started? Not that we have to, it's not until June or something, is it? It's quite late. So no one started? Doesn't look like it. Well, I reckon this is not yet, not really sure how to. Yeah, well, look, okay, so getting started is, yeah, so there's a few people, oh, I'm not really sure how to start. And it's a bit like trying to write a novel or something, I don't know. Where do you start? You have to put pen to paper or get something going. Now, we have got a starting point. We have got a starting point. You could say, right, I'm going to open up that HandE staining protocol and get it in a Word document format, okay, just as a starting point. And then I'm going to look at those two resources. So we've got three now because of the one that Felicity posted. So we've got the little PowerPoint one, and oh, great. So Emma, you've read some as well, and you're saying, right, I've got the resources. They do align very well with the project. You know, those ones that we just looked at now when I shared the screen specifically said causes of hematoxylin being too dark. So one way to start would be just get that protocol out, fills the pages up nicely, and then you start think, right, I'll look at steps 1 to 3, you know, xylene. And is there anything to say about that step, about whether that could be a problem? And if there isn't, you could say, you know, from what I've read, the dewaxing with xylene is not something that's critical. Of course, if you actually look at those resources, you'll find that it could be. Okay. And so, yeah, people still confused on structure. Okay. So the other way to approach it is, so there's different ways of doing it. I reckon one way, which is nice because you start off with words on the screen, is to get that protocol for the HandE staining, which we had in the lab manual, get on your bit of paper, and then see if you can map the things you find in those 2 or 3 resources onto that protocol. Where do they go? Do any of the comments go with xylene? Do any of the comments go with time in hematoxylin? How many of those comments then relate to differentiating after the hematoxylin, you know, that acid alcohol step? How many of the comments in those resources can you then map onto the eosin staining, and how then map onto the time in ethanol after the eosin? Because some of them will, I can tell you, they actually map directly. So you say, right, I've now got my protocol, I've got 2 or 3 resources, I'm trying to map the different comments on the resources as to a particular step. Now, the simplest way would then be sort of reword that in your own words, and then you've got an annotated flowchart. Ta-da! Another way would be to, you know, how would you then convert that into writing? And you could say, well, you just sort of start writing a narrative about the first step in HandE staining is to dewax the slide in xylene, because that's what the protocol says. You say, although this step isn't involved in staining per se, if you don't get all the wax out, the stains will never be able to get into the tissue. So it's a critical step. Now, how could it go wrong? Well, not enough time in the solutions, or maybe the solutions are getting contaminated with wax, you know, from everybody's slides. And this, you know, or people put them in the wrong solution by mistake. So you can imagine how you then convert the flow chart and the resources into what now looks like an essay type structure. But of course, that would also work quite well with the table. So you get the protocol and think, right, I've got maybe 3 columns in my table. The first column is the HandE steps, and you just paste that right in from the protocol. The second step is things that can go wrong, and maybe the third column would be how it could be fixed. Yeah, so that would then be a way of making it as a table. And we've talked about 3 ways of doing that, haven't we? You start off with the flow chart, annotate it somehow, put it into your own words, Bob's your uncle. Get it into a table, that's another way. Or once you've annotated your flow chart, just sort of write it out in words to make it a bit like an essay. So there are different ways of structuring it. And it's a bit like saying, well, how do I know when I'm finished what actually is the outcome? You think, well, we did the HandE staining. It all came out surprisingly variable, even though we followed the same protocol. Next year, if we repeat this session in class, what advice can we now give next year so that they don't make, so there is less variability next year. So structure-wise, okay, do you need an introduction and a conclusion? I don't think so. You don't necessarily need an introduction and conclusion because this is a troubleshooting document. Imagine someone said, hi Nikita, hi Philippa, we've got this problem. Look at all this staining variation. Can you come back to me next week with some comments as to how we can sort this thing out? Don't care how you do it. I just can't have this level of variation. The pathologists are getting cross. Think, okay. And then we come back later and say, right. And that report in real life could be either a written document saying, well, we've got to make sure this xylene is fresh. And although there are 3 changes of xylene, because there are 60 people using it, I think we're going to need bigger volumes of xylene because I suspect the xylene's getting contaminated in wax. And if we don't get all the wax out, because the xylene isn't pure enough, that'll cause reduced staining. And that's a sort of narrative style. Or you could sort of almost produce it as a poster, stick it on the wall. Yeah. So it's we're just trying to solve a problem, and that's why the format is flexible. Yeah, so it's good. I can see why it's not clear. And I'm also thinking, next year, when I set this assignment up, we are going to need to make it a bit more clear. But I think that analogy to a real life situation, maybe that is quite helpful. Just imagine you've been given this problem, say, Francesca, come back to me in 2 weeks' time. Here's the protocol we're using. You know what we're up to. Do some research and help me minimize this variation. Oh, yeah, okay. And you come back and you've either rewritten the protocol with specific details, like, let's go back to that de-waxing step. You could say, I've rewritten the protocol. Now, rather than saying 3 times 5 minutes in xylene, it says 3 times 10 minutes in xylene with agitation, and change the xylene after every 10 people or something, or use 50 ml jars of xylene rather than 20 ml ones because the volume's too small. So there's actually different ways of doing it. Yeah, you could almost, like another way of doing it would be to open the standard protocol we've got already, turn on track changes, and just rewrite the thing with more detail or whatever, with all those changes tracked or in a different color or something. That would be doing it. So you can see why there's various ways of doing it, because I think that's the options that will be open to us in the real world. Yeah. But making a start, that is a tricky thing. And sometimes you've got to start with the easy thing, like, well, I'll just read the resources. I don't have to write anything, or make some notes. But I would say if you've got that protocol in front of you, when you're reading those references that help, you'll be able to say, that bit relates to that part of the protocol. And I'm hoping that will be helpful. Now, there's only 9 or 10 of us logged in. I don't want to do all the talking because I want to give you a chance to talk about the problems or successes you've had. So feel free to turn your microphones on and say hi. Have I got this right? Can I do this? Can I do this? Or whatever. Feel free to have a chat. Yeah. Okay. So Philippa, a little while ago, saying, right, it's a page enough, because looking at the protocol where it went wrong, that does seem like quite a short assignment in a way, but you need to do a little bit of work to find out what things can be changed. Then you have to do another little work to map them onto that assignment, but also a little bit more thought that then has to be put on as another layer, if you like, saying, but specifically in our session. I mean, even little things where it says, flood the slide with eosin. That's what the protocol says. That's all it says. You think, well, hang on. We're not dealing with professional slide stainers here. We're dealing with people who are staining a slide for the first time. I'm going to rewrite that protocol so it says, flood the slide with eosin. To do this, make sure the slide is level. Make sure you've tapped off all the previous fluid, so it's not diluting the new eosin you're going to put on, and then put the eosin so that it floods the slides completely, going right to the edges of the slides, so it's almost bulging up in the middle. And if any leaks off, top it up again. So that's a lot more words than flood the slide with eosin. So it's making all sorts of assumptions, that protocol, that we know exactly what to do. Even with the, immerse the slides for 3 minutes with agitation. What even does that mean? How can we possibly have a consistent protocol when something is so vague that it is with agitation? Now, of course, if you're a career histopathologist and you've been staining for 10 years, you think, oh yeah, agitation, that means I stick them in the Copland jar, carry on with my business, and just pop back every sort of quarter minute and give the thing a jiggle. I know what that means, but we don't know what that means. What does with agitation mean? Does that mean pick the slide up and move it up and down 3 times every quarter minute? How do we get consistency when the protocol is so vaguely written? And it's not, this is such a common problem in science generally. I know when I was doing my PhD in virology, and I was trying to grow papillomaviruses in tissue culture in a sort of 3-dimensional sort of synthetic skin thing. You have these protocols from a lab, you think, I mean, it's all written down there, but it's actually not got the detail you need to do it properly. So there's no maximum word count, although there is a limit, I think, as to how much you can go on about this, but there is no maximum word count. It's not a thesis though, but it is worth 30-odd%. So it's reasonable that it could be a long document. But if you say, nah, I can do this super clear, super short with an annotated protocol or a flow chart, and it's, I reckon I can cram it onto 1 page, because that'll be really convenient, fine, I don't mind. There are several ways of attacking this. On the one side, if you go into more detail, that's great, that's sort of bonus and worth credit. Then there's also skill in keeping things concise. So there is credit to be had no matter how you approach this assignment. The key thing is, the hallmark of judging it is like, do I think if we did what you say, there will be less variability? So what the other thing that's missing from this assignment, my fault, is it hasn't really got, there's no rubric for it. There's no marking rubric. Probably because it's a new assignment. It's the first time I've run it. Had to change it mid-course, and we were asked to publish it and get it into the handbook by the end of that Friday, which was like in 3 days' time. Now, rubric's really nice. The thing about a rubric, though, is it does, is like a marking rubric says, 10% of the marks will be available for this, 20% available for that, is it does slightly constrain how you're going to do it. So you would need to design a marking rubric that worked just as well for an essay type answer as it did for an annotated protocol as it did for a table. And that would be quite hard. So instead of the mark rundown, instead of a rubric and so forth, I guess we're trying to build it through talking and agreeing. And if you want to submit a draft of what you've done, I'm very happy to look at that and send it and comment it back. We've got plenty of time to do this. And these sessions here, there's a chance to catch up and say, am I on the right track? If I did this, would it work? So I haven't got a mark run down with the assignment because I haven't built a rubric for it, which would be a little bit of a challenge, but hopefully we can clear up any ambiguities here. But as I say, it's quite a big assignment, worth a few marks. And certainly, if you want to send me a draft, say, hi, I've done the first bit, but before I go too far down this pathway, is this the right sort of approach? Fine, happy to do that. Delighted to do that. Yeah, so references be really good. So uh, if you've used the 101 steps to histology, reference that. If you've used that other PowerPoint, reference that. Felicity had another resource she came across, whack that in, uh, uh, and just be honest about it. Because imagine if it's just a real world sit down. Any reference style is okay, absolutely. If someone said, "Hi, I'm going to come back in 2 weeks with how we're going to fix this," you've got your annotated flowchart or whatever it is. That's actually going to be more useful to the lab manager if it also includes the 3 or 4 references you got it from, uh, and also it gives the document a bit more authority. So if we're like a junior histotechnologist and someone's given us this task and we come back saying this is what I think you need to do, they're going to think, oh yeah, says who, So if we've got our 4 or 5 references, you'll be away. And if you want to stick it on A3, that's fine. I don't mind. So, and if you've got a mate who's a histotechnologist and they give you some advice, then you stick that in as a personal communication. I acknowledge the helpful discussions of Julia Waters, histotechnologist at Fiona Stanley, who happens to be my mate, or whatever it might be, or your mum or dad or whatever. So put the resources in, okay? Or even if it's a fellow classmate, I don't know, helpful discussions from so and so. That's it's a mark of professionalism. So yeah. So it's not a standard assignment like an essay, is it? It's here's a problem. Can you tell me how we're going to fix it? I don't care how you do it, but you can see what the problem is, and you can see the protocol, and you know what the classroom's like, and you know there's going to be 60 students fighting for space again next year when we do this. And when you read the protocol, was it clear to you what it meant by agitating the slide or flooding the slide? If it wasn't, can you make it better for next time? Yeah, thanks, Emma. Glad it's making sense. It's sort of making more sense the more I talk about it, the more I begin to understand what I really want to. So it's an emerging thing, but maybe it won't take you that long. Brilliant. Excellent. Get on with something else. So we've been chatting away for half an hour or so. I'm just going to scroll back through the chat to see if I've missed anything because I didn't start recording until a little bit. The first part of our discussion that wasn't recorded was mostly about people who had started doing their sketching and slide descriptions for the portfolio, which is a different assignment. So that part hasn't been recorded, and I don't think we've missed out that much. But as Nikita said it, what I might do is clarify what that SharePoint link is for, why you might want to go in there and pick out your slide. And that's also where you go, if you haven't got an H&E slide, you can go in there and bang, pick up someone else's and say, well, I didn't do an H&E slide because I was sick, or I was in Adelaide, or I was in quarantine, or I didn't want to come in because I thought I might catch the virus. You just pick someone else's slide from there. So, hello, I've borrowed Emma's slide or whatever because I haven't got one on my own, and I'm basing my discussion on that resource. That's the plan. I clearly have to clarify that in the assessment and the announcement. Great. Well, look, unless there's any more chit chats specifically, we can wrap it up. So you can email me at any time if you want advice on the assessment, and you can email me a draft as well, of course. Of course, be happy to help you through. That's the point. And any communication is good. We're all trying to somehow stay motivated off campus. I must say it's sort of been a bit of a blur for me because it used to be like the weekdays you work on campus, the weekends they're different. You're at home. I'm at home 7 days a week now. I don't know what day it is. I seem to be working every day. But anyway, that's okay. Getting out of my bike quite a bit. Well, I'm going to stop the recording because this is just aimless wibble from me.